I am opening at 7:08 on Monday, July 25th, the July meeting of the Master Plan Implementation Committee for the town of Cohasset. And in this discussion, the most important business is to reacquaint ourselves with where we were, where we would imagine we would like to be, and how we will rely upon the enormous amount of information that was developed during the master plan process, because it is in effect, it's our anchor. So with that, I will ask for roll call, starting with Cassie.
Hi, Cassie Militester here.
Mike Sardina.
You're muted, Mike. You're muted. We can hear you're saying you're here. We know you're here, but you're muted.
Actually, I am here, but I'm not on the committee as far as I know.
Okay.
Oh, so that.
I just got
the.
the email, and I thought I was supposed to just tune in because I've been working with Tim on parking stuff. But
there's a vacancy, Mike, if you're interested.
Yeah, really.
Parking in Elm Street. Those are the couple of key things.
That's a serious. Marisa.
Yep, I'm Marissa Manley here.
Mr. Davis.
Tim Davis, I am here.
Amy Glassmeyer here.
Hi, it's Jen Boylan. I'm joining in about 3 minutes on video, but I'm on by audio right now.
Great, thank you. Miss Lind.
Good evening, Lauren Lynn, Planning and Zoning Director for the town of Cohasset.
And Jen.
Yep, sorry, I was just mentioning Jen Boylan, and I'm here on audio and will be joining by video in a minute.
All right, do I have everybody registered in?
I'm here too, as I think I was on the committee at one point, but I'm the liaising from the Historical Commission.
Right, thank you.
Julia Gleason.
And that is correct, and you are still there, Julia. All right, so we are a Master Plan Implementation Committee, which is reassembling on the basis of a change in leadership, and also with the knowledge that we had a lot that we already figured out, and we were pursuing that, as well as there are concerns on the part of the select board, as an example, about how does a master plan implementation committee evolve. And so that's not something we can solve tonight, but what I can say as a professional planner, that is not an unusual situation for a master plan implementation committee to be faced with. I will say, on behalf of the experience of leadership from Katie Dugan, we did an amazing job of carrying out many of the elements of the master plan that was created and was structured with a 5-year time horizon. And I'm not sure that this night is the night to go through that, because we have to acquaint ourselves to the task that we have. But I will say that I think the path that Katie had set out is a pretty good one when you're thinking in terms of 2, 5, 7, 10 years out. And so I don't think we're in a position where we have to abandon that path, but more to acknowledge that our current circumstance is that we have some activities that we've done quite a good job of and made great progress with, and others which are still within a shooting distance of the next 1 to 2 years. And what our job will be as we go forward is to figure out there are some immediate issues. There's no doubt about that. But there also are issues which are longstanding. And I would ask that we figure out a way to educate ourselves so that we know how to take that up and pursue those items because they are the items that were specified by the community when the master plan was finished. So with that, I think that Tim sort of disappeared from my screen. But Lauren, can you give us a kind of run through of where we are and what are the most serious issues most significant issues we want to deal with? And also give us an update on how the state legislative and governor's resources have changed where we are.
Certainly. So there's a lot to sort of unpack. Just as to sort of to take a step back and look at where we left off the last time the Master Plan Implementation Committee was meeting. We were in the process of looking at zoning, knowing that we need sort of a comprehensive zoning reorganization and redraft. We know that that's a really big topic that we're going to hear a lot more about. Not only is our zoning bylaw really several decades sort of since the last major rewrite was done, there's also a lot of content changes that have come out of the master plan. There's about 20 zoning related strategies that came out of the implementation chapter. So looking at all of those things, we sort of recognize that there's an opportunity to modernize and reorganize in a way that would be more coherent and easily accessible for the public and people to use the bylaws. But also there's an opportunity to integrate new concepts, new tools, different opportunities to change that are more content and policy related. We had gone out to bid for a request for proposals for a comprehensive zoning analysis and rewrite process that would help us with all of this. And through the process of interviewing a consulting firm, there was actually more than one bid response. We had 2 bid responses, but going through that process and realizing it sort of became evident that this needed to be phased. So at that time, it was sort of structured that this group would move forward with the zoning bylaw rewrite with our town council and move forward in that process. And then in a parallel track, we would also engage with a planning and design sort of consulting firm. We were looking at Stantec particularly to look at 2 specific areas, and that one was Cohasset Village. We know a lot of people, particularly as we let out of the Elm Street corridor work, a lot of the feedback we were getting from the community was parking, looking at the village, looking at ways that we can, improve economic development. And there's all sorts of different overlying themes and topics that go into when we look at Cohasset Village. The other piece of it was looking at MBTA multifamily compliance. That's a state legislation that we know is sort of looming. It's a long story there, but I can get more into that another time. But knowing that we're looking at potential state legislation that would encourage us to do sort of a multifamily zoning approach, which is not something we really typically accommodate by right in our zoning at all right now. And looking also at our 3A corridor, there's a lot of opportunity that was seen. So we thought, under the guise of preparing for potential compliance with state MBTA legislature, we also could use that as an opportunity to look at our 3A corridor and think about how we might potentially rezone. Right now, residential is not allowed by right in our commercial corridor, and perhaps mixed use is a good opportunity that we might want to encourage. These are the type of concepts that we were looking at. So we did, with splitting that, we have the zoning bylaw formerly working group, which we'll get to a bit later on the agenda. It's now been repackaged. It's a new charge, but it's essentially the same group moving forward, the zoning bylaw committee preparing to work with town council on that reorganizational piece. But then in addition, we went with Stantec and asked them to provide us with scopes to take a look at these 2 projects related to the village and the 3A corridor. So we have scopes of work from Stantec we've had them since June. The idea now is that because we've had since the last time master plan met and over the past few months, not only have we had changes in leadership at master plan level, but also there's been changeover in our dynamic, in our government structure, new elected appointed officials. So right now where we are is sort of, we have this opportunity to move forward. We have these scopes of work, but we need to take a look collectively. And does this group continue to want to move forward with that? And is that something this group wants to recommend to the select board? Sort of just need to make sure that there's universal buy-in before we embark on a path. With that said, I'll also just note, Amy had asked me to touch upon sort of state and federal funding. There's currently right now through the, it's working its way through the state budget right now, but there's a potential that we have up to $550,000 in funding allocated towards the Elm Street corridor project, which would really be a big game changer if we were to receive that funding. That was the reason the governor essentially put into a bill any of the grant funding requests from the One Stop for Growth that were runners up he put those through in the bill.
Wait a minute, say it again. Lauren, can you say the One Stop for Growth? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so last year for
Okay.
the One Stop for Growth program, the grant program, we applied for the Elm Street Corridor project, we applied for zoning bylaw work, and there was another resiliency grant that we had applied for that year under a different grant program for resiliency work at the 40 Park Ave building, which is the building that CSER is located in. So those three programs, along with a regional sewer grant, that's another grant program, are now sort of have made their way through the bill in this from the governor to spend state ARPA funding. With that said, it's been kind of working its way through the different phases of state budget legislature. We still have, though, the Joan Moschino put back in, because some things had been stripped out. She did put back in that Elm Street Corridor funding and resiliency funding for 40 Park Ave. So should this bill get passed, we can anticipate funding coming that will, one, be dedicated to Elm Street Corridor work, and also resiliency for the 40 Park Ave structure.
Lauren,
Okay.
Sorry, go for it. You had a
I was
question?
just gonna is the downtown revitalization, is that a part of that grant as well, Lauren? Is that separate?
No, that's not something that we had applied for in the previous grant round. But there is a separate state earmark that came from a different pool of money that we do have $50,000 already. The town is holding it and it's allocated for the downtown village revitalization. The trick here is we have $50,000 already allocated, earmarked from the state budget for the downtown revitalization. Stantec has noted to us, though, that they are not interested in proceeding with one scope. They want both projects if they're going to proceed. So that's just something you should be aware of as we consider the two Stantec scopes, is that they're either all the way in or all the way out. If we don't proceed with Stantec, there's an opportunity to go back out to bid. But again, that's a whole nother process that we would have to unfold.
And so that 50 grand, would that be used towards Stantec doing some studies downtown for us, that 50 grand? Okay.
Yes. The other thing where we left off is that Katie Dugan had been working with this committee on looking at sidewalk connectivity and sort of trying to figure out the next step of how, like, we already have sort of a system in place as to how we prioritize. And yes, we need more work in public engagement around what we do next. But the big piece to the puzzle here is funding. The only funding that we have right now for sidewalk projects is the Complete Streets funding program through the state. We've been a recipient a couple of times in the past. That's how we did the town common, is one example. But the state has now capped Complete Streets funding for each community. You can only receive a maximum of $400,000 every 4 years, which, when you translate to funding for sidewalks, is a drop in the bucket of how much we would need to design and construct every sidewalk that's been identified in our Complete Streets plan. So with that said, Katie had started working with myself and with our finance director, Don Pyatt, to start to look at ideas as to how you might do gap funding. So that's really sort of also another big piece that you're going to hear. And I know the select board recently had a discussion and they're really interested in sidewalks and that sort of infrastructure. But the real key piece here is that we can prioritize as best possible, but until we have funding, it really doesn't, it's not going to go anywhere. So that's sort of another piece to the puzzle that had been in the master plan arena when we last left off. And I want to say the spring. So I think I answered everything that Amy asked me to speak to. So if I didn't, please just ask me to elaborate on anything else. But thank you.
Lauren, I have a question. When you said that Stantec wants not only the $50,000 we've got for the village, what is it they also want?
They want both projects. So both projects would be not to exceed $50,000 without having to trigger another rebid process, because we're already.
When you say both projects, what's the other one?
3A, the Route 3A.
3A,
corridor.
okay.
Yeah.
Now, is there any problem with giving them 3A?
No, there's not, but we just need the agreement that that's something that we want to go forward with. It had been one of the priorities. We had been working it out, and now it's similar to sort of where you see the zoning bylaw process right now, but we have agreement that we're moving forward. It's just getting everyone realigned and making sure everyone has the same priorities as to how that scope unfolds.
Okay.
Which I guess I could segue into just another update on zoning bylaw committee. The zoning bylaw working group had been under master plan. They've been recharged as a zoning bylaw committee to stand alone and report directly to the select board and not as a offshoot of master plan. They right now we have a draft scope of work from KP Law with our town council, Carolyn Murray, and also Judge Judith Cutler, who is sort of renowned in this arena of doing this sort of work and doing zoning analysis and working on that. However, the difference is, so Tom Callahan, chair of the planning board, has been really involved in working with the zoning bylaw committee. He sort of stepped in as the chair role of this group. He wants to, he has rewritten the zoning bylaws himself. He wants to move forward with town council and the judge editing his version, whereas the scope we got from council recommends that, while they recognize that Tom has this version, that they do their first initial, take a look, start their draft. So we have two options for how this moves forward. Select board and the zoning bylaw committee will be meeting in joint session on August 2nd to have a discussion and sort of a kickoff meeting and direction from the select board as to how we move forward on that scope.
So Lauren, who actually determines the way forward on the ZBWG? Essentially putting a piece of paper down and saying this is the path we're taking, versus KP Law stepping back and saying, based on our professional experience, we think the path should be this way. Because I think as a ZBWG, which was related to the Master Plan Implementation Committee, it would seem that KP Law probably is actually more responsive to the select board because they are paying for their services than the ZBWG. And I'm asking this because what the key issue is here, ladies and gentlemen, is when we get this done and when we present it to the public. And the key is that we don't make the mistake that we did last year of trying to do something that is out of sync. So last year we tried to bring zoning changes in the fall, where typically the town only deals with finance issues. And as a result, we had a kind of red herring meeting in which there was an unexpected conversation that took place. It did not finish, and we found ourselves essentially almost going back to square one, versus having KP Law be responsible for conducting their own independent scoping, and then that being informed by the ZBWG.
Amy, I think it's a really good comment. I know the question was for Lauren, but
it is for you actually, because you're on the yes.
But I will say that we've been very vocal about having the support and being charged by the select board to facilitate the tasks and the necessary needs for the zoning bylaw working group to be productive. So we've been extremely vocal. The select board understands it. They're here for our support. I don't think anything would go up to annual town meeting or special town meeting without the select board and additional boards having some type of say in it. So we have been very vocal because we don't want people to just be spinning their wheels and spending the time and effort on something like this. It should matter and it should be affected and implemented correctly. I will say that I think that I hear you on KP Law versus, who's kind of running the charge. I think that Tom sits as I think he's the right person to be the orchestrator. And then so our first meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago, he basically is outsourcing on who's responsible for work product. And then he's the orchestrator of managing all that work product and bundling up and then sharing it to the select board and the various boards. And I think that as far as bandwidth and capacity and also passion, I think that Tom is that right person to be that orchestrator. I think that KP Law is there for support and as a resource. And then we were going to also outsource things to the Zoning Board of Appeals and various other boards to help provide work product. But then Tom basically sitting as that orchestrator, if that makes sense. Lauren, do you agree with that assessment? Because I think that if KP Law takes that charge, I just don't know, because we're on a very strict timeline to be effective and get us ready and prepared for special town meeting, annual town meeting. So I think that Tom kind of wanted to lead that charge. Lauren, do you agree with that?
I somewhat agree with that assessment. I think what I will just be frank in my concern is how this is unfolding, is that we're really driving towards a timeline because Tom wants to bring 12 zoning articles to this upcoming special town meeting. And frankly, I've said this to him before and it just doesn't like to hear it. I don't think that timing is right.
No, I think it's definitely an aggressive timeline. And I think our committee should have the voice to push back on that. Yeah, so I don't know necessarily if I agree if KP Law should run that timeline unless you think that they can be impactful and effective. But I
No,
agree,
and I think-
that is an aggressive timeline. I agree with
Yeah,
that.
so there's a couple of concerns I have, and then I think, so there's gonna be, ultimately, there's going to be multiple phases of this, no matter what. There's like phase one that we can look at, which Tom is sort of queuing up as the first 12 articles that he wants to bring to this December town meeting that are more of like the reorganizational structure, and he has all that written already. Then we also anticipate a second phase following timeline to be determined that are the more content heavy items that I feel that Tom is planning to sort of farm out. He doesn't have that language yet because he wants to sort of, go through the phasing and farm that out as to who that the most appropriate person is. But as the first 12 articles, they're already written, and Tom is looking for critiquing of his language. He's not looking for someone to start brand new, and he's been very adamant. He does not want to, reinvent the wheel. He's got it done already. He's already got it rewritten, and he doesn't want someone else to take a crack at it first. So that's, I think, the framing of like where we're looking at here. Ultimately, to Amy's question, it will be the select board's decision to make. So, and then also to reiterate Cassie's point, anything that goes to any town meeting, the way that the town meeting process works out, it all starts with, before it even gets referred to the planning board to start their public hearings, it starts at select board, they make a recommendation, planning board opens the public hearings, they make their vote, and then it goes on back to select board, back to advisory before it even gets on the warrant. So there's a lot of checks and balances here. It's not like, there could ever be a committee that would move forward with an article. I suppose they could go through a citizen's petition, but anything related to zoning per state statute has to go to the planning board. They're the responsible entity to be involved in this. So
But Amy, I do think as a lesson learned, because there's a lot to learn from last year, I don't necessarily know if someone from the ZBWG should be the ones presenting at annual town meeting and special town meeting. I feel like we learned a lot, and someone in a better position, whether it's KP Law or even someone from select board. I haven't seen anyone volunteer to be that person, but just to be the face to the public community. That is something that I feel like we engaged Stantec at one point. We haven't really gotten there, but I don't know if it would be as effective to have someone from the zoning bylaw working group standing up there to present these warrants.
Right.
Um,
And just to give you another item, in before we even get to the actual warrant article, Tom wants to plan a public forum for August 15th, which he has distributed slides, and he wants to hold a forum. Like he is running. He wants to go now. He's very upset that we had to cancel a July meeting.
Gave him
because
some
we didn't have a
feedback
forum.
on that presentation. We're gonna have a lot of Z's in the audience.
Yeah.
So
So I guess what I want to raise to this committee, because this committee has been involved before in this, is your feedback is really important to this process as well, because I know particularly Amy had mentioned at one point, public engagement. We need to make sure we have a specialist. We need to make sure we do this right. And that's why it's like, before we get too far out of the gates, let's make sure everyone's on the same page as to how we do this.
So I would like to say that for me, the most important lesson I learned last year was that there is a protocol. And when you break a protocol, you have to have something so significant and with no opposition to be able to survive it. And you can read through the history of various negotiations and you can see that. And so my feeling instead would be that we work between now and December to really march out all the pieces of the things we think are important, and also have a preparatory conversation with the community, maybe two, so that people feel as if they're engaged, that they're not expected to vote beforehand, and that there isn't opposition on the planning board, because ultimately the planning board is central to this. And as far as I can tell, I can't see how we're going to manage this if we have any sort of dissent within the existing infrastructure, political infrastructure that we have. So my view would be that we would be better to really orchestrate this over the fall, do maybe 2 or 3 public discussions, bring in communication capability to demonstrate why these things are important, how they're important, and how they're going to affect people, and then be ready in the spring to be able to make that 12 items that we think are important. And I realize that I'm playing on the basis of politics and also on the basis of people's sentiment. And I know that those two things can, put you back in the garbage can if you're not careful. So by just going a little bit more slowly and getting more information and being able to articulate things better, my feeling is I think we'll be much closer to our target of public sentiment.
But to that public piece, Amy, we don't have that yet, right, Lauren? That's out of Stantec's scope.
Right, that's not, we don't have Stantec engaged.
We wanted it. It was a
zoning
part of the
process.
RFP process, and they can provide it, but we took it out of their scope. I can't remember why.
Right, so we don't have Stantec right now. The scopes that Stantec gave are not in coordination with the rewrite. It's just two separate projects.
So does that mean we have to go back to Chris and ask for resources to allow us to be able to do this?
Well, I think what you would need to do first is just make that known to the select board that someone does want this resource, because as it is right now, Tom wants to do it on his own. And if that's how if people are comfortable with that, that's fine. It's not my call to make. And that's why we're sort of in this position where it's like, we've had this changeover in leadership and a little bit of scattering. We're getting everybody back together. And we just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page before we
No,
start
I think to set the record straight, I think the former board was all for having that public piece being outsourced and farmed out.
Yes, I agree. And that was sort of actually also like when I spoke with Carolyn Murray to try to sort of get on the page of where we were going next, she called me and also was expressing concerns because she's like, what I'm hearing now from, the main driving force is not particularly consistent with what the whole group was saying. I think where we last left off, we had a group that was sort of 50-50, as to what the scope looked like. And that's why we're sort of just, from the town staff side, we're just like making sure that everyone who is involved in this is in agreement, because we don't want to get too far down the road and someone say, well, that wasn't what we agreed to. That's not what we said. And, and then, like you said, like Amy said, it's very important, particularly these things, to get it right the first time, because, if you go to a forum, mess it up, like, have public perception, it snowballs. You really do need to make sure it's done correctly.
Especially using people's time effectively and appropriately. You just don't want to go down the same path. We have to learn from our mistakes. So.
And I really appreciate your insights, Cassie, because that's real. It's not even a mistake.
I didn't know that was taken out of scope. I thought the public piece we were still trying to figure out. I didn't know it had been eliminated, and then moving forward with that, I thought it was still point of discussion.
I honestly think that what we have to do is create a campaign, and we have to do it in pieces so that people can absorb it. And it might not go quite as quickly as we would anticipate, but I can definitely say from the north end or the west end of Cohasset that people are completely amazed at what's happening in their environment, and they feel bereft by the lack of anybody paying attention to what's going on. And so it's our job, if we want to be successful, as changing something as big as, the essentially established set of rules of how this community works, that we have to go just a little bit more slowly and do a little bit more PR. I mean, we really need somebody that's writing and listening. Like, the thing that's terrible is our local newspaper, they don't ever write a single thing about what's going on in town. And yet the whole place is changing. I mean, all these things are occurring. And so we have to figure that out before we decide to say, this is how we think the future should be, because I've already slammed against the wall. I knew what it felt like when we didn't succeed the last time. And I know that there's a path that if we just take a little bit more time, and we also strategize about, the big deal is Cohasset is two places, right? We're on the west side of town and we're on the east side of town. We're at the ocean side and we're in the forests. And we do not have unanimity in those environments. And so we don't know how people will react. As a result, just a little bit more winding back and thinking about, okay, what's really important? We do know what's really important. The master plan told us that. We hear it on a regular basis. Select board hears a regular basis of what's going on for people's lives. So I think that I wish we had the ability to have somebody help us make this passage. This is a very complex passage for any community in any place in America. And we don't have somebody that's acting as a third party, stepping back and saying, here's the path and this is what will happen. Here's the path and this is what will happen. And as a result, we're trying to do the best we can on our own. But that has real risks. We saw it.
Lauren, isn't there a new consultant for the town that did the new website? And I don't know, what is their role? It's either PR or communication.
So we have some sort of PR communication firm that we had been working with, but since then we also have hired directly for the town a communications
Him.
specialist. Yeah, his name is Justin.
Yeah, just could
yeah.
he be that person? Does he have the bandwidth to do something like this? Or is he more kind of all-encompassing generalist?
Yeah, so he, I would say he can help us to a degree, but the level of like drafting, creating content, things like that, like he can interview and help us with videos and things like that. But the creation of content material, that's sort of where he would run into a little bit.
Yeah, maybe that could be something to think about, Amy, with the lack of resource, and instead of going out to bid again.
So Lauren, in your experience, what would you do in a situation like this? You're the planner. You're stuck in a tunnel. You can see the light, but you don't know what is the stuff on the sides that are going to keep you from getting to the end. What would you do?
My honest recommendation is that I think we are moving in a good direction. My concern is the timeline and sort of speed at which it's queued up to do right now, because I do think it's going to be too fast. And my honest opinion is that if we were to wait until annual town meeting, a few more months, these zoning bylaws haven't been recodified in 35 years. What's 6 more months going to do? I think it would be best for the community to slow it down a bit, start to do our work with KP Law, make sure, and then identify what level of community engagement specialist do you need? I don't think that we're ready at the point to just jump into a forum in mid-August, but I'm scheduling it because that's what I've been told to do.
I mean, the presentation alone is going to take 4 hours. It's going to be hard for the community to absorb all that. So it's going to be,
I think it's just the manner in which it's delivered. The presentation is really, it's an art, and it needs to be done in a way that it's a really dense material, and you need to be able to say it in a manner that's succinct and explain it. That's 30,000 feet for the common layperson to understand.
yes.
And I'm concerned that, if we get really into the weeds and density of it in the way that sometimes it can be queued up to be, that we are going to lose people and confuse them.
Can I ask, because I feel like a few people in this group have been on that committee or have been on other committees that have received reports from that committee. Have we done like 12 is surprising for me to hear. And I guess I don't feel like I know as a group we sent a supportive letter, but I don't know that I've heard about 12 different zoning proposals. Right.
No, I don't know that level of detail. And that's sort of also where unfortunately, this is how the things happen. Things have gotten shaken up. You kind of you can't just keep moving. You have to take a step back and remind people where we started and the plan. And I know, Tom is very eager and he's really passionate about this and he's been working so hard, but he forgets that he's been running down this freeway, people have not been keeping up with him. So it's like he's got a grand scheme and plans for things. He wants to ask the select board to do second night town meeting, which I also have concerns with because we have trouble sometimes getting a quorum just for one night. So, there's a lot of concerns here that's sort of why I feel a bit in a precarious position, because while I am honest with him and I voice the concerns, he also is just very passionate about how he wants to proceed with things. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not my call to make. I can give my opinion when asked for it. But other than that, it really comes down to all of you people who are involved in this is just as much as, as Tom is. And it's like, everyone has a role here. And I think that we need unanimous support from the committees. He is concerned that we're going to go back to the drawing board and reinvent the wheel. And to some degree, a jog of the memory is necessary, I think. I don't think we need to just completely throw it all away and go back to the drawing board. But I think taking a little bit of just a pause and making sure that everyone is in agreement would really be beneficial to making sure this process goes off, without a hitch.
And I will say that, was that me? I will say that I feel like it can be hard to give constructive criticism back. And I think that so in Tom's defense, he said on the last email, he said only one of you have given feedback to me. So I think that, all of this is good feedback, but I don't know if Tom is hearing it directly. And maybe that's because people on the committee don't feel like they can be transparent enough about that, but in some way or fashion, it should get conveyed to him.
So
So I don't know if the master plan implementation committee can almost provide like meeting minutes or something to Tom or to the zoning working bylaw group, just so that feedback is conveyed to him, because I don't think a lot of people within the committee have provided feedback.
So I would like to say that I will know, I feel confident that we have done our job in preparing ourselves to change a 50-year-old legislated set of policies when the ministers of the churches in town can report back to me that they raised the issue and they understand why it's important. And the real estate agents need to be able to say, this is why it's important. And the teachers in the schools need to say, this is why this is important. And the random person on the street says, you know what? I saw a sign. I understand. I've heard something. I think it's important. This is what our town needs. If we can't get to that point, then we're not actually in a position to counter what we can't anticipate. And that's what worries me the most. It's not about someone's idea, which could be perfectly right. It's about the extent to which people come forward with us when we need to make such a big decision. It hasn't been done in 35 years. No wonder it hasn't been done. It's terrifying to people. And yet we need to be able to get enough votes. We need 60% of the votes for us to actually achieve our objective and to walk out of that high school gym and say, we did our best, people understood what we said, and they agreed with us. And that's what I need as a professional. I need that because I'm worried that otherwise it will be just this person, that person, all over the place, and it will not focus on the key issues. We have key issues. We have water issues. We have harbor issues. We have, the future of high school buildings. We have all these various things. And so we might not think that the zoning bylaw actually influences those things. Like, what will the new high school look like? What will the rule on 3A look like? But it will influence everything. And so I would rather work with professionals to help us figure out, first off, what is possible. Second off, what is probable. And third off, what is the best. And then from there, sort out what we can do in a way that people can absorb. Because we saw last time, it was like being pulled off with a big hook.
I guess the other thing I would add is it's important to have town leaders on board, but the other piece is, and I don't know all of the details of all of the 12 proposals, but with zoning, typically there are people who are impacted, or like small constituents that are impacted, and those tend to end up being the vocal ones when it comes across. So I guess I don't know if this is part of the process already, but are we anticipating who the people are that are impacted and how they're impacted, and going out to them for feedback and seeing if we can resolve any of their concerns through the plan? And I have no doubt that in some cases we can't, and that in some cases there will be negative consequences for certain property owners. But I guess it would seem that it would be helpful to at least know what's coming and be attuned to sort of who are the property owners who would be negatively impacted, and is there some way to reduce that inevitable conversation, I guess.
So the great thing about Katie Dugan and Tom and Woody was that they and I should ask Kasia, do you feel like you guys figured out what the consequences are for the modifications of just the general sense of changing the zoning bylaw.
Like specific parts of it, Amy, like specific
Like,
warrants.
when we had a neighbor who stood up and said, I bought this lot, I had this lot.
Yeah,
I
Tom and Lauren, I know Tom did, I thought Lauren did too, like spoke to those individuals, and the majority of the time, those people, they were given bad advice or bad guidance, and Tom was able to kind of redirect them and understand how they wouldn't be impacted by it. So information is key, like you said, communication is key. And what's the big picture? Like, why are we doing what we're doing? It's not to take people's property rights away. It's to make a more effective bylaw for rules and regulations to facilitate that, what we need for our town. So, I think that the voice of opposition was, they're personally impacting me, you're attacking me, we've been paying taxes on these lots, and we're not going to be able to keep our families in town. And so the voice of opposition was extremely negative, and that just became the squeaky wheel. So in the second charge, kind of, because we do have all this information, we've downloaded the entire assessors database, we've combed through all the lots, we've done sensitivity analysis on FAR and density, we've done all that. But the next step, the kind of next layer that we were going to do was look at those specific, like, non-conforming lots who actually would be impacted. And we haven't done that yet.
So one of the things, Lauren, that we could really use, which we lost with Katie stepping down from being the chair of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, is we need someone to help us come up with an understanding of who's affected, how they're affected, and what are the exceptions that the change in the zoning bylaw will accept based on a certain time frame and based on a set of circumstances, so that the majority of people, when they open up that book and it tells them what's going to happen, there's going to be a set of circumstances. They're going to be able to place themselves in space and time, and then they're going to say, well, they've tried their best, I'm not going to be impacted, or if I'm impacted, I have some recourse to go and negotiate that, so that when we get to the meeting, people feel like we understood that they were vulnerable. They are vulnerable and they have expectations. And then there are people who are otherwise outside land ownership circumstances that have very different circumstances that we have to figure out. But we were right on the cusp of that. And then we couldn't get beyond that. We couldn't get to closure. So I would say,
and then oppositely, a lot of the work that Woody did was that he benchmarked our town's bylaws to, like, the surrounding 20 towns, or the most comparable 20 towns around us. And we did find through funneling that down to, like, apples to apples, is that we were very lenient compared to other towns. So in effect, in a sense, we are becoming more stringent to be compared to our, surrounding towns. So that would impact people probably negatively to a certain extent. But I think the voice of reason is like, well, compared to other towns, we should be more stringent, that we are very lenient. So I mean, it's that sweet balance, right? But I think that a lot of people in town are seeing lot clearing and the quote unquote McMansions. And so that was the task that we had at hand. But then again, a lot of people that were speaking up were saying, these are my property rights. I've been paying taxes and a lot of money, and I want to be able to downsize and age in place. So that's just a little bit of history there. So I think you're right, Amy, but I also think there will be that voice of reason, because in effect of what we're doing to the bylaws is just comparing ourselves to other towns that might be more stringent. So I think there will be some consequences there, but to your point, it's getting out ahead of it and communicating that to people of how they can be prepared for it, which we didn't do at all. It was just like, here are the changes. This is what, but there was no like reasoning behind it or why. It was more just, I think a lot of the big voice was like, we don't want McMansions in town. I think people are like, I'm not trying to build McMansions. I just want to be able to subdivide my lot and build something for myself to downsize.
So Lauren, this is something for you to log, and I know you're paying attention, and Cassandra is also thinking about this. We can't operate in the absence of resources, and we can't have resources that are so formulaic, like, Stantec does just fine with this and this and this. We need somebody that takes us contextually and actually figures out, here is the set of circumstances you're faced with. Here are going to be the things which people are going to debate. Here are the options that will be the best outcome when there's never a perfect outcome. That's what we need. Otherwise, we're just basically taking $50,000 here, $25,000 here, and we're trying to create a reality that doesn't work that way. We need a professional who's a land use, knowledgeable, probably a lawyer, to figure out here are the consequences. And we've never done that. I mean, God love the master plan, or the zoning board working group. They did an amazing job, but they don't have the ability to close the question so that people can really understand it. Hate to put that on your shoulders.
I hear you and I agree.
Yeah,
think
like
that-
it's a little like preaching to the choir. So we just need to communicate that effectively to the zoning bylaw working group.
I also think we have to be a little bit more public about all of this. We're never in front of
I mean,
anyone.
the RFP that I responded to was all encompassing holistic approach.
Oh, yeah,
so
no, it's
all
more
needs.
about in the interim, while we haven't settled on anything, we should be having signs out that say things like Cohasset's future. Cohasset is thinking about its future. We should have these things on the green. We should have these around the main drags, that we're in this process trying to figure it out. So people start asking, what in the hell is this about? Why are these people trying to do this? And at the same time, we do have to have resources that are not formulaic. They have to be more intuitive than we have approached the problem so far.
Why don't you go on Cohasset 143 and do a little presentation, Amy?
Well, I think that we could, as a group, do that. We could do that.
Because you know, when Glenn Pratt took over the Historical Society, he was on talking about how things changed, you know, just, I don't know how many people see it, but you know, like we're doing a brochure right now for the Historic Commission on just, so we're working on a thing just saying, okay, guys, this is what your Historic Commission does. This is why we're here. This is what we've done for the town. So we have that in a way to communicate. We're hoping to have that out like next year. We're working on it now. But what does the master plan have? It doesn't have a venue, so let's get one. Or you guys.
These are some ways in which I think that Justin Scherer from the communications department can help. And, you know, he'd be more than happy to put together a video or interview, whatever is the most appropriate means. But before we start doing that, we need to have a unified voice. And I think that's really the key, that was where you saw Katie step away, was she said, we don't have a unified voice and I can't keep doing this. Because it's a, you know, lack of a better words, it's a waste of time and resources and energy. And until we have a unified voice and unified agreement, we can't move forward without ultimately realizing that it's going to fall apart. And that's, I think, why I have such concern right now, in that we never got to that conclusion. We never got the confirmation that we had a unified voice when Katie stepped off in May, whatever month that was. So now it's like, here we are, and it's like, you know, it's very important that we move forward with these things, but it's important that we make sure we're all on the same page and do it in the proper way, and not just like running because we're afraid of like a time clock that we've made up. You know, that's I think the moral of the story that I have here.
So what, you know, one thing that could happen that's maybe it sounds preemptive, or it sounds too soon, but we should have signs out saying that Cohasset is thinking about the future. And that includes how we use land, how we plan buildings, how we make our community. And they should just be everywhere. They should just be these little reminders that are plugs about the future, because people have no idea. They have no idea. I mean, I talk to my neighbors because I live in a horseshoe and I can go one house at a time. But if I had something on both ends of my horseshoe and it said Cohasset's future, what does that mean? Changes in, and they have to change too, right? The frames have to be the same, but the new messages have to be things that are signaling to people that circumstances are changing. And we, I mean, in the best of all worlds, we'd have a discretionary budget and we could allocate that money to, once a month change in the messaging on the placards. But the truth is, you only have to have like 5 or 6, and you just move the placards around town, right? So that people are starting to think about, well, where do I live? What do I care about? What's important? Because this is such a big deal. This is the biggest thing that ever happens in a town, is changing the rules.
Tim, I feel like you're usually pretty vocal and you don't seem to be vocal tonight.
On this issue, I have not been involved in the zoning issue other than peripherally. So I really like what I'm hearing, and I think you're all on the right track. Take your time, get it together, make sure that we don't go through the debacle we did at the town meeting.
So Tim, you have a sailboat, right?
I do.
Would you be willing to have a message that you flew on your sail as you were going in and out of the harbor saying, change is afoot, Cohasset is changing. Join the
Not even, I heard
conversation."
the interiors of the yacht club can be pretty vocal, so you could just do something on the steps.
Well, I certainly would consider any of these things, but
Okay, we got you on the record. We heard what you said.
I'm always willing to consider.
Okay, because that's, it is, there isn't any other way for us to do this. It's so amazing. We're a town of 8,000 people, and yet communicating with 8,000 people is a hell of a lot harder than 25,000 people.
No, it is very difficult. I know. And I do know there is a big divide between those of you that live on the west and those that live on the east. And I've hear that from the select board and trying to do the things that I'm trying to do, which to a large extent, I confess, are benefiting the east, because that's what I do at the harbor. And most of the people that enjoy the harbor are on the east. What we are trying to do in the harbor is to make the harbor more accessible for those not only in the west, but also visitors from outside of Cohasset. But that's not easy to do, as we all know. So I'm happy to help. Just let me know what I can do. I'm putting a sign on my sail is not going to do much, Amy, because there are, of the 8,500 people that live in Cohasset, there are very few people that see that.
Well, I mean, being clever or being bold has very low cost.
Yeah.
Very low cost.
Okay.
Okay, so we have now talked for an hour.
Yeah.
And the question is, how do we go forward? And what do we need and who do we need as we go forward in implementing aspects of the master plan, which are things like affordable housing. Look at what we've got at 380, 390 Chief Justice Highway. Something stuck, and we need those numbers for ourselves, not because we're going to pass some state law or be accounted for. It's because otherwise we're only going to be a very, very narrow part of America, and that's not necessarily what we all want to have as our neighborhood. The second thing is that we have these huge infrastructure issues that are coming before us. We have to deal with 3A, and it's all happening right now. They're starting to, I don't know if anybody's driven by Stop and Shop lately, but their entire sewage system is now up above the surface, and you can see what they have in the way of tanks.
I
And
had my water shut off for 5 hours on Friday.
Oh, wow, I didn't hear that. Whoa. So, you know, why isn't that made public, right? So we understand.
Brenda called me. I got a call.
Okay. The other thing is that we do have these big infrastructure issues that were pointed out in the master plan. The high school may be in perfect shape, but it does not comport with the 21st century. So what do we do about that? The fire station is in the wrong place. It needs to be up on 3A. What do we do about that? Those are the kinds of issues. No sidewalks, right? You know, we have I would say that the average house price in Cohasset is about $1.2 million now, which shocks everybody. And we don't have sidewalks. So those are things which I think people want and expect we would like, but we don't know how to do it. So Katie's path forward was stay the course of the 5-year path. And we have to lobby like hell to get the resources necessary for the things that are not in that 1, 3, 5-year plan, but the things that are immediate. And I understand completely from the select board that they feel that there's a public discontent for what it is that the master plan said, because it didn't affect where they are. And I think we need to figure out how we can accumulate that new information and adapt it to the existing master plan, because that was a really good master plan. As a professional planner, I would say we did the best job we could, and it was a good job for an 8,000 person place.
Is there a select board liaison to this committee?
Jack is the
There's not.
liaison to the zoning.
Who is
bylaw. Jack,
Jack Creighton?
correct.
Yes,
He's the
Jack is
liaison
the
to
zoning bylaw.
zoning bylaw.
Yes, Jack is for zoning bylaw. We don't have a liaison to the just master plan in general.
Okay.
We have historically had somebody from the advisory committee, which wouldn't be such a bad deal if they were willing to like take what we had to say and push it up to the front. I'm just saying.
I don't recall us having advisory committee in the past.
Oh, you weren't here, Lauren. This was predated your time. When I first started on the planning board, we definitely had somebody that was sitting and watching and observing
Oh,
our meetings.
For master plan, not the implementation.
No, that's right. That's correct.
Okay, yes, that makes more sense then.
Yeah. so-
Okay, well, so I will take some suggestions, I suppose, for maybe next steps. There is a conversation taking place on August 2nd, a joint meeting of the zoning bylaw committee and the select board. It's an open public meeting. I think you're all welcome to attend. And if you want to voice as citizens, I think that'd be important. I think we need a plan to get this committee back together more regularly. And as to what cadence that is, I'll look to all of you. And then, you know, this meeting, I think it was important to get everyone back together and sort of just get some face time about what we do next. But I think we do need to go back and like redigest the material that we last left off on Katie's presentation. And ultimately, I know it was circulated, but you may need some more time to think about it. But we need to sort of give Stantec a yes, we're going to move forward with you or not, because we've currently kind of had them in limbo since March, and it's I'm sure they're growing a little tired of that. So you know, I'd hate to lose an opportunity when we have the scopes in front of us if it is something we want to pursue. Because, you know, if we do have to go back out to bid, I can't imagine that we're going to hear from Stantec again.
So Lauren, my recommendation would be, and I'd ask the committee to weigh in on this, is my recommendation is that you lay out clearly what is expected from Stantec, and that we take a non-present vote about that way forward. Because we can't, I mean, really, literally, we can't waste time, because there's money stacking up and we're not actually necessarily in a position to take advantage of it till we get to a point of moving some of these things off our plate. Can I get a second on that?
Yes, I will second that. And my with the question, do we have funding available if we want to put Stantec on 3A as well?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, so.
So
Lauren, could you-
I would second Katie's suggestion. Lauren, if you could just lay it out for us and we'll have a, what'd you call it, Amy? A non.
Well, it is binding from the sense that this committee has made a determination of it, but it is a recommendation to the planning board, which the master plan implementation committee relates to. I think I have that right.
Yeah, lay it out for me, Lauren, so I can understand it, you know.
So Amy, you're suggesting a non-binding vote to include Stantec, like their full scope that was originally bidded?
Yes, yes. And when I say non-binding, it's because I am not an elected chair, I'm an acting chair. But the bottom line is, we need to move that forward.
I agree.
But
I'm sorry to interrupt. Has anybody been able to read the Stantec scopes that are dated June 2nd, 2022?
I haven't seen that, I confess.
Okay, that's fine. I want to make sure that you're all okay, comfortable with the way that the scope is framed out before you move forward. I think that moving forward, I think this group could get back into a regular monthly basis, but would you be open and able to meet in the nearer future so that we can regroup and
Yes.
vote on that?
It might be helpful if there's a liaison from the master planning that hops on the zoning board, the zoning bylaw working group to express what we're talking about here. Or Amy, I know that you were charged by Tom to run this meeting, so maybe if that feedback could come from you to start.
I will report to Tom on the basis of the minutes of this meeting. But we did operate independent of the planning board unless it was such a situation where we had to take a vote and it was something.
I'm just gonna voice this. I think it's gonna become a circular reference where we're gonna go back to the zoning bylaw working group and Tom's gonna say, no, we decided not to hire Stantec.
Okay, so
You know?
actually,
Lauren, do you agree with that, or do you think we should just try it and see what comes back?
what you're saying is that this has to go back to the planning board. The planning board has to agree that based on what the master plan implementation committee has suggested, that we will pursue the relationship with Stantec.
Well, so I would say it doesn't necessarily need to involve the planning board, but if this group wants to make a recommendation to the select board that we move forward with the scopes as written, that's what you need to recommend.
Okay.
And then the zoning bylaw working group is working with its own scope. So there's 3 scopes here that we're following. There's the KP law scope with the zoning bylaw group for the rewrite and reorganization. And then there's 2 Stantec scopes, one for the village and one for the 3A corridor.
Okay, so can I get an abbreviated recommendation from a member regarding what Lauren just said? Can I get a motion?
Well,
Yes, fine.
I will move that, first of all, after consideration of the scopes, which I will promise to do, then I would recommend we accept those and move forward with Stantec. But I'd like to review those first. I apologize, I have not done that, which I will do tomorrow morning.
Lauren, can we postpone an affirmative decision until such time as the members of the master plan implementation committee has a chance to read this?
Yes, I think that's appropriate. What I would suggest is if you're amenable to meeting sooner than a month away, then we could schedule something and get this group back together and get us all on the same page to take that vote.
We
Do you
do
think
that.
that
If
we
that's
can
a
meet
one
even
issue
before?
item, I'm
You said,
happy.
Lauren, that the next meeting is August 2nd with the select board?
Sorry, what, could you repeat that?
Is the next meeting with select board August 2nd?
So the zoning bylaw committee is meeting with the select board. But this committee, the master plan implementation committee, we haven't identified a next date yet.
So why don't we say that by Wednesday, if all members of this committee can read the materials necessary and make a determination, can we do a vote by email for moving forward or not?
I would suggest I'm hesitant to say yes
Do
because
you want to have a voice vote?
I think that would be preferable.
Okay, so could we do that by Friday?
I'm happy to do that.
Does that work for any, does that fail to work for anyone? Please raise your hand.
So we'll meet again on Friday.
We will meet again on Friday. We will set up a time. We'll try to make it work for everyone, of course. And at that meeting, it will be that we are making a determination about moving forward with the Stantec two-part proposal.
Well, and so to be clear, Lauren, did we open up their financial bid? Or they're just their scope bid with two, right?
Just their scope bid, the financial bid, you're not supposed to open until you
Right.
award it. But I've spoken with them and we have scopes and I can show you, you don't have to, I'm not expecting you to read them right now. But I can show you, we have two scopes where I worked with them as to how much funding we had available and what our limitations were from a bid process. And these are reasonable scopes that they can do, that they feel is appropriate. So I'll quickly just show you.
Okay.
So
Lauren,
these documents, this is Downtown Village. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
So these are sort of the pieces it breaks down to, of course, project management, parking study and recommendations, looking at the analysis of what's there, the supply and demand, and sort of what management might be there, whether there's a potential to explore shared parking and what other tools and techniques that sort of the analysis they'll do there. They can take a look at development and zoning regulations patterns and sort of look at a build out analysis. Some of the things that we've heard that may be of interest are looking at fringe zoning, whether you want to change that like sort of hard boundary that exists right now between the residential and the business area. These are opportunities to be looked at. And then taking a look at our existing design guidelines. They've been in place since I want to say 2015. And I think just getting an analysis of, is there anything that should be tweaked there? Working with the community, we know the village in particular is going to require a really robust community engagement piece. So this is how they sort of base that out, working with the committee, particularly doing a walking tour and conducting public workshop, doing focus group meetings with the different stakeholders and people who are, make up the town village. And then they would supply that content that's similar to how we were talking earlier, that package that would go out for the one pagers or the signs that are saying what we're doing and giving us social media and website content. And then of course, coming back to us with a presentation and recommendations as to what we do next. And then the next scope for 3A is 3A study. It's doing sort of an analysis and taking the MBTA's community zoning to the next level, looking at what potential development scenarios might look at, looking at zoning recommendations, taking a look at our infrastructure. I particularly highlighted for this the challenges that we will have and that we have existing with our regional, wastewater and sewer capacity. And then particularly if you think about with the MBTA community zoning, the state will be looking to sort of push communities to do more multifamily by right, which we already have existing infrastructure challenges as it is. So I sort of asked them to take a look at what we might look at and then what, in addition to state grant funding programs, what we could use as infrastructure financing options. There's different sort of techniques that you can build into zoning. They could give us recommendations on that. And then they would do stakeholder engagement that would work with the landowners, but would also really be more of like presenting to the planning board, because we anticipate the village is going to be more of a sort of smaller knit interest group. And I think the 3A may have like less of it, very fine interest group, to be determined. And then of course, at the end, they would give us back recommendations as to what a development scenario would be based on our feedback and what we heard from the public, what zoning recommendations might follow, and then infrastructure needs and what sort of financing options might be available to us. So these are what the scopes are. Again, I'm not asking for you to vote on the spot, but that's what we're looking at. And I want to make sure that there's nothing glaringly missing, that you have concerns of there, or if that feels like an appropriate scope for each of those projects.
Lauren, thanks for outlining that. That's awesome. Could we apply that similar to the zoning, the bylaw rewrite and reorg if we wanted to?
We have actually a different scope from KP Law that breaks down the pieces of it. But yes, we have a similar framework for KP Law separately.
Can we have a meeting where we go through the discussion of what KP Law's circumstances or what they presented to us? Is that the right thing to ask?
So, yeah, I'd be happy to give an update. However, at this point, I'm just a little, I just want to wait to see the direction that we get from the select board on this.
Okay,
Because we're gonna have a meeting with the zoning bylaw committee on the 1st, just to get everyone, we're getting 2 new members appointed tonight, so it's just regrouping everyone. And then the meeting on the 2nd, the select board actually has called because they want to address the zoning bylaw committee and give their preference for how this proceeds. So that's why, before we make any scope tweaks to the KP law scope, because I know Tom's main concern with the KP law scope was that KP was writing it on their own and acknowledging that they know that there's a zoning bylaw addition. However, they were going to take the first initial third-party look and analysis and do the writing. And Tom's big contention with that is that he wants to use his document as opposed to KP law taking the first start at it. So that's the main point, and that's why I think on August 2nd, we're going to have a determination from the select board giving the zoning bylaw the direction as to which scope we move forward on. But after that meeting, we'll have more to update on.
I guess the question is, are we bringing back this feedback regarding bringing Stantec in for the public component of outreach for the zoning bylaw changes? Are we bringing that back on August 1st as from feedback from this group? Or are we not prepared to do that until after this group collectively has a non-binding vote?
I think this group needs to vote. And I do think that even though they are going to be tangentially related, they are separate and they're focusing on that zoning KP scope law. I think this committee should, and we put on the agenda, should discuss a time to return to select board once you've all had some time to get back into things, to update them on what you're doing and what you're recommending. So perhaps what we can do is, if we regroup, you vote on the scope, then we can sort of identify when in August we can go to the select board and have this group update and recommend that scope and get that started.
Some sort of plan.
is that okay with you, Cassia?
Yeah, I guess I just don't want Tom to feel like we're going around him and going directly to select board. So that's why that missing puzzle piece is getting feedback back to Tom and the committee after the vote before select board.
Well, so for the Stantec stuff, you mean?
For not those 2 scopes, for
Okay,
the
yeah.
including them back into, because it was removed, right, from the rewrite and rework. Stantec was removed from that. Now I thought we were saying as a group, we want them back on it.
Oh, I see. See, I misunderstood that piece.
Right?
I thought that Stantec had 2 very specific elements that would clearly feed into potentially zoning bylaw working group changes, but that they are doing scoping analysis for particular issues.
Yeah. They're very
Yeah,
specific.
They're separate.
scopes.
Yeah. I don't see them as, they're not concatenated. I think they're really, one is doing things we need to know. The other is dealing with legislative articulation.
Okay, specific to those 2 scopes, downtown and 3A. So
Exactly.
we're not suggesting to bring them back to the rewrite and reorg component of the bylaws. Okay.
Is that right, Lauren? I don't.
Correct. That's
Yeah,
my
that's right.
understanding. I do think that as we look towards a phase 2, where we start getting into the content heavy things, that's when you will want a Stantec to do the build out analysis and the things like that. But we're not talking about making dimensional changes or anything that's really going to be overly offensive to people in the first phase, as Tom has laid it out. So I don't think that, I think we can identify the need for them when we get to that next phase.
Got it. Okay.
So do we need a motion based on this discussion, or we're not really legislating anything?
No, I don't think you're in a position to make a vote really on anything.
Okay.
If are folks available to get together for like a quick 30-minute meeting on a morning? I know it's tough, but we,
On like the 29th?
yeah, on like the 29th. That's what you guys mentioned Friday, so I was thinking
I
that might
can't
be a
do I
possibility.
can't do a Friday morning.
That's what I mean. Could you do a Friday morning?
I cannot do a
You
Friday.
could not do a Friday morning.
I could do a Friday afternoon. I can do a Thursday morning. Anytime Thursday I could do it. And if you want my vote, once I take a look at these things and make any comments, I'm happy to add my vote. If we have a, I don't know how this works with open meeting, but you tell me, Lauren.
Okay, so we have two times that are possible. One is, so do you have any time on Friday, Tim?
Yes, Friday afternoon.
Okay, oh, so we have Friday afternoon and we have the possibility of Thursday
Anytime.
morning for people and then also Thursday afternoon. So why don't we look at 3 possible times?
Thursday afternoon or Friday afternoon probably works best for me.
Okay, so what we'll do is Cassandra and I will send a poll tomorrow, and then if you could just respond to us. If we're looking for Thursday afternoon, we absolutely have to post before tomorrow afternoon. So we'll get something to you first thing in the morning with some times, and then we'll go with the majority vote. If anyone has any concerns, comments, I know it's tough and to turn around, but if you have anything and you're not able to make it, please just email them to me and I'll distribute them to the committee.
Is this everyone? Should we just look, do people have their calendars? I'm just wondering if we could save a bunch of time and emails going back and forth by just looking at Thursday and Friday calendars, because I know those get lost for me in the hundreds of emails.
I honestly don't know if I'm still actually a member, so if I am, I'm happy to be there and vote, but if I'm not, I was sworn in.
Yeah, I would say that you are still a member unless you.
Okay, so
decide to step off.
anytime, what were the, I sort of wasn't paying attention because I was thinking it didn't affect me. Tell me again. Thursday morning, Friday morning, Friday afternoon?
I think we're looking at both afternoons. So I'll just
Okay.
start and say I can do between 12:30 and 3 on Thursday, and probably not until late after.
All right, Lauren, send out your
Okay.
Google poll or whatever it is, your doodle.
Your doodle.
All right, we'll send it. I'm thinking if Thursday afternoon works for folks, that's probably going to be best for Cassandra and I to make. So we'll look at Thursday afternoon.
Perfect.
We'll shoot for something. How about 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock on Thursday?
Perfect.
Great.
Then I'll have to say no to that.
All right,
But
we
you'll
have
still have a
3.
quorum, right? Or should I
We
do
have 3,
something?
we
I
have
mean,
3.
I go to this balance class, which is because I can't walk. And that's at 2:30 on Thursday. I can't, it's only once a week. I don't want to miss it.
Yeah, of course, you don't want to miss that.
So
Yeah,
can I read the
sorry.
things and then communicate with you?
Yes,
Okay,
let's do that.
read them more thoroughly than I just glance at them, but,
Yes. Yes, if you can read them, give me your thoughts, and we'll at least get a minimum of 3 people.
and so we want to approve that they get 3A and the village.
That's
What's
right.
that?
Okay,
Marissa?
Yeah, I was gonna say afternoons are really tough for me right now. Both my kids are home, so I don't know. I don't think I can really do anything other than nights, at least for the next couple weeks.
So Lauren, can you think about what the less than unanimous vote of this group could produce such that we would move forward with recommending the STEM Tech 2-part program?
So yes, I will give some thoughts. I don't want to continue to belabor people's evening tonight, but I'll be in touch tomorrow and we'll figure something out. We'll get together and then, like I said, in the meantime, you could take a look at that. Just plan to give me your thoughts individually, at least by Friday. Whether it's just a thumbs up or you have a concern, just please let me know either way. And then we'll determine next steps.
All right, great. Well,
Sounds
thank
good.
you very much on behalf of the Master Plan Implementation Working Group. And the next meeting that we have, we should establish our organizational structure so that it's clear how we run a meeting and all of the items that go along with that. So this is a public hearing, so we're going to close it. It's not a hearing, it's a public meeting. But the next meeting will be posted and the public is encouraged to attend. Thank you on behalf of everyone here. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Cassandra. And for all attendees, we will be in touch.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.